So, hi, my name is Nicole Fuller. I am the collections manager for environmental archaeology at the Florida Museum of Natural History here in Gainesville, Florida. I work with our curator here to ensure the proper stewardship of archaeological faunal collections. So I myself am a zooarchaeologist, and here in the lab, we're a three-field lab. We have our strongest in zooarchaeology. We also have archaeobotany collections, and we have archaeopedological collections as well. So in my position, I think of myself sort of as a librarian. So I know about each parts of the collection, and I'm able to direct folks in research using the collections. Part of my job is to review and approve loans and research requests, and also to stay up on the collection curation standards for museums. So we work on updating constantly our collection curation standards and how our collections are curated. Those are archaeological collections, and both are comparative collections, which we have for comparative skeletal collections and also comparative botanical collections. I did major in anthropology, but I didn't change my major to anthropology until the summer. I think it's the summer before my senior year. So I was in animal science here, and I was pre-vet, so I wanted to be a veterinarian. And I had taken enough credits in anthropology as electives to still be able to graduate on time. So I changed my major to anthropology without knowing what I was going to do with it. So kind of a risk in that sense, but still I knew that I liked anthropology a lot since I'd always elected, to take those classes when I could. And so once I changed my major, I did finish on time. I didn't know what I would do with a degree. So I talked to the chair of the department at the time and asked them, how can I get some actual experience in working in anthropology? Thought about archaeology as an option at the time, and so they sent me to the museum here and said I could volunteer or internship, and so I took that opportunity and started volunteering in the historical archaeology division, and I was washing ceramics, and I didn't find that to be fulfilling. But I kept doing it. And while I was doing that, I actually found a bone fragment, and I wanted to know what it was. So I took it to the collection manager at the time in historical archaeology, and he directed me to the collection manager of environmental archaeology, my predecessor. And I'd asked him what this bone is, and it turned out to be the ear bone of a manatee. And so he showed me the comparative collections here that we have, and he also showed me the archaeological collections, and was just pulling out bones and saying, like, this is this type of fish, this is this type of animal, just from these bone fragments. And I was really impressed by that, and I wanted to do that too. So I interned the next semester with him, and he started to teach me how to identify bones using the comparative collections, and he thought I was really good at it, and so he ended up hiring me after I graduated to work on an assemblage, to work on a faunal assemblage that had just recently been excavated on a contract. And so I worked different jobs as a faunal analyst here at the museum before starting grad school. So for a year after I graduated with my anthropology degree, I worked for a year here at the museum as a faunal analyst, and that was really lucky. Really lucky, and that doesn't always happen, that you get something like that with a bachelor's in your own field. So I was really happy about that, and then I started graduate school, got my master's, and then continued to work here at the museum as a final analyst, on and off, but then also as a collections assistant. And so I took all of those opportunities, to do what I could. And it was, that work as a collections assistant where I said, okay, this is really cool. Like this is what I like. I always feel like I sort of fell into zooarchaeology because I had no idea what it was when I started even in taking anthropology classes. I had no idea what it was until I came to the museum. So I had no thoughts about, what that could be. At first, my only question was, what can I do, with this degree? And so sticking with it for me was just, I loved doing it. So every opportunity that I could get to, be a final analyst on the project, I was like, please pick me. So sort of just kind of sticking around in a way, but also taking the opportunities to be mentored. So not just coming in and saying, okay, this is my job now. I'm going to come in and ID bones for 8 hours a day. It's sort of like being able to have those conversations, and the previous collection manager here was, he was my mentor, and having those conversations about research in general, like what he was doing with research, because at the time I didn't have a research path. And so that sort of influenced, how I went through graduate school and the research that I picked to follow on. My research is on shell rings, and so there are these sites in the southeastern U.S. that are variously described, but for the most part, they're these large shell, mounded shell, and then there are these cleared plazas in the center. Some of them are U-shaped or C-shaped. Primarily, the Florida ones are sort of incomplete rings, but we call them all shell rings. And so the sites I work on are 2 sites on the Georgia coast on St. Catherine's Island. And these sites are archaic period, so they're around, oldest 5,000 years old. And I studied the fauna from those sites, but one of my primary questions about those sites is when people were living there or when they were using the site, when during the year. And so I look at oysters because they're primarily made up of oysters. The shells are primarily oysters, and then there's some clams and other types of shell, but mostly oysters. And so I look at the stable isotope geochemistry. I use carbon and oxygen to look at when during the year they were being collected and deposited, or just deposited, or when the oysters died, really is what they tell me. It doesn't always, it's not a one-to-one. But I also use population demographics of a parasitic gastropod that lives on oysters called it's called an impressed otostome, and they only live for a year, so you can track their life cycle by looking at their population demographics in the archaeological record. But you have to use fine screen, so they're super tiny. They're about max like 6 millimeters. So archaeological field training, which that is actually really important for museum work when you are working with archaeological collections, because it helps you evaluate research requests that come across. It also helps you understand proper curation of collections. So if you don't know what a provenience means, or you don't know what an FS is and how those might relate and how units might relate, it might be difficult to problem solve. It might be difficult to make sure that things are even just curated in the right place and have the right labels, so those things are very important. So when something loses a label, it's the information is gone. And also having the experience of working in the field and knowing what types of things you put your collections in last and which don't last, and which you should only be in temporarily, like a paper bag, for instance. It may, is it archival or not? Or things like that are really important. How long should you keep something in tinfoil? What kind of plastic are you using? You need to put a label inside the bag, even in the field, because the information could rub off on the outside, of the bag. So things like that are important. So getting that field experience, even if you are working in a museum, and don't go out to the field a lot, which I don't, but I do get to on occasion. Another one is research methods. So classes on research methods. So that, like I said, and before, will help you evaluate research requests, so you can properly and appropriately steward the collections that are under your care, because it is realizing that everything here is cultural heritage, and if it's here with us, we are supposed to be good stewards of that. And so knowing what is best for the collections is really important. So say, if you get requests, and because of all the technological advances, there are a lot of requests for destructive analysis. And so knowing how best to assess those requests, because people can get very ambitious, and they want large sample sizes, and say, hey, I want to take samples from all of these things. It's like, well, we can't really give you permission for that, because we'd like to have collection left, and want something to remain. So I think those are also important skills and concepts for collection management. Talking to any and everyone that you can, and I feel like I always learn something new when I do that, and come away with a new interest that I have to say, okay, I'll put that on the back burner, because you can't do everything. One of the questions I got when I would tell people I was majoring in anthropology, the first question is always, what are you going to do with that? And believe it or not, I still get that question. And I get to say, well, I'm already doing it, and this is what I do. And usually people think that's very cool, and but it's not something that people know about. Not even, like I said, when I started, I didn't even know this type of position existed. So just get out there and get as much information as you possibly can on the thing that you're doing. And it's a lot easier now than it was for me when I was going through early grad school. So lots of ways now to get that information, and don't be afraid to reach out to professors or anyone in an industry that you're interested in. So that's also important. So don't just get the Google answer. Make sure you're talking to people who have had these lived experiences in these positions. And that is actually an important consideration, and I don't think that sometimes people may not think of it as seriously. So if it's something that you're truly passionate about and you truly want to do, because in all honestly, like, we're not going to make a whole bunch of money as like anthropologists and museum workers. So it's sort of like a work of passion. So you just have to make sure that it is something that you want to do, and set yourself up properly. So you just make sure that you're planning for your life in general, not just for your career, whatever that may be. And because you're more than your career, right? So a lot of us, could get pretty ambitious and say, this is what I want to do with my life, because it's going to make all of this work out. But self-care is important. So make sure you can, provide that for yourself. And so know what options you have, and give yourself varied experiences. So not just in anthropology. So everything is becoming so much more collaborative and interdisciplinary. So make sure you're getting varied experiences. A lot of the things we do here now at the museum have to do with digital imaging. They have to do with AI. So kind of think about what those types of technologies and things might mean for anthropology, and for whatever your career might be in the future. if you are in Gainesville or anywhere and would like to volunteer with the museum in our division or any other, we do take volunteers. Many of the other divisions also take volunteers. So outside of environmental archaeology, if you're interested in archaeology and anthropology, there's historical archaeology, North Florida archaeology, South Florida archaeology, and ethnography, and Caribbean archaeology. So there's lots of opportunities there. So just get a hold of us. We'd be happy to help. So it really is, for me, a dream job and sort of an ideal position.